Emily, thank you. Thank you all for joining us today. We appreciate it. This is the 3DHP for the Nation Interest Group meeting. As most of you know, this is a USGS NSGIC cooperative project to basically engage states and their private sector partners, as well as regional governments, in modernizing national hydrography by deriving new hydro data from 3D elevation program data. I want to thank you all for joining us today. If you wouldn't mind putting your name and organization in the chat, we would greatly appreciate that. Let other people know who's on the line and who you're associated with. Throughout the presentation, if you have questions, just put them in the chat and we'll try and review them. We will review them, we won't try. Today we are going, just a quick project update. The problem with having slides open in both places is that I don't advance them in both places. Project year 2 is in place. Thank you, USGS, for assisting in that and continuing to support the effort. It is a calendar year project this time, so we're running January through December. We've extended the info form to 1.5 hours. We're going to try and keep the core content to 1 hour with the option to continue discussion in the last half hour for those that want to continue discussion. And I know there was a little confusion this time with the using the meeting invite, so we're probably going to return to a meeting registration. We tried something new this time and it wasn't particularly successful. As we've mentioned before, we're going to start replacing the form with an interest group meeting quarterly. That'll be March, June, September, and December. And we will have a call for presentations is open. If you're interested in presenting your 3D hydrography work at the forum or to the interest group meeting, just contact me directly. We'd love to hear from you. Today, we're going to get an update from USGS on the 3DHP program. That's redundant. The 3D hydrography program. We're going to introduce the NSGIC 3DHP for the Nation Info Hub. And the primary purpose of today is to do a quick review of the critical factors we've been working on for this last year. And I am hopeful to engage you all and get your feedback and basically to get everybody on the same page as to what needs to happen. And then, of course, at the end, if time permits, we'll have a discussion about your 3DHP activities and any news. So with that, I would like to turn it over to Sue Buto, who will give us a USGS update.
Thanks, Linda. Nice to see you all today. Quick USGS update. There's been quite a few changes in the 3DHP redundant program in the past couple of weeks. I think we've been foreshadowing that I would be coming on as the hydrography data acquisition lead, so that comes as no real surprise. I've transferred the better part of my duties to Brian Hadley, who is the new elevation data acquisition lead on the 3DEP side of the house, and am kind of coming on board. Really, today is sort of my first day where I'm really trying to focus on hydrography going forward. So again, that's not a big surprise. However, Becky Anderson, we're sad to say, has taken a role, well, we're happy for Becky, but sad for us, has taken the role of our user engagement chief in the National Geospatial Program. So will no longer be the program management lead for the hydrography program. We are, however, very lucky to have Steve Achel coming on board as the hydrography management and planning lead in Becky's stead. So we won't have any break in coverage for the hydrography program and management lead. And Steve brings with him a wealth of knowledge about the program. He's been involved in one way or another for a very long time. So we're super lucky to have him come on board and not give us any breaks in that role. And again, Becky, thanks for all the work that you've done for hydrography, and we will work with you in the future with user engagement, I am sure. So we are moving forward with our 3D National Topography Model 3D Hydrography Program call for action. There is a fact sheet in process, and a web page has been launched. We'll send a link to you guys in the chat for that web page. I think many of you had the opportunity to review the larger call for action document. And that document, I believe, will still be published, but there's some comments and information that needs to be incorporated. So we want to get a fact sheet and a web page out to folks as soon as possible. We also have pilot projects for 3DHP ongoing in Southeast Texas, in Oregon, Pennsylvania, and in South Carolina. We don't, I believe, this fiscal year have any additional funding for pilot projects, but that may be to be determined as we go forward, since we just got a federal budget. And I don't know if we've had a chance to even understand what's in our budget this year. We are actively building the program. We're researching some key components of the program, such as data model and a system architecture to support the program, and also working to build out the 3DHP information infrastructure. The new HydroAdd tool is now publicly available, and we'll add a link to that also in the chat. The HydroAdd tool is designed to support discovery of water information in the context of the stream network. In the infrastructure, the 3DHP is intended to be the geospatial underpinning for the Internet of Water, to allow federated information to be attached to the stream network and discovered. We are also working on a broad agency announcement similar to the 3DEP broad agency announcement. That is in the planning and early implementation stages. We can't release a broad agency announcement until we have funding to match our partners' funding. So hopefully that will be coming soon. And we also wanted to briefly mention the future of NHD and WBD. Linda, I think you'd sent an email regarding this question. We haven't answered you in the email, but have had some internal discussions, and want to just mention here that the idea is that the 3DHP is intended to replace the NHD, and the NHD will at some date be yet to be determined, will stop being edited. And that final version of the NHD will remain available to the public for download as an archival data set as we move into this new program and new data structure for the 3DHP. I believe the plan is similar for the WBD. So I think that's all I've got today. If you want to move on, or if you want to ask questions, I'll let you run that, Linda.
Certainly. Any questions for Sue? Feel free to come off mute. Trying to look back in the chat.
Yeah, I don't see anything in chat.
And thank you, Sue. That is a question that I'm sure we're going to have. The future of the NHD is something that we'll have continued discussions on. So.
Yeah, I think so. Thanks, Linda. We'll maybe even put a slide or something together so we have that in our back pocket.
Okay.
So this is Dan Ross with NSGIC. Just a question on the pilot projects. Will that information be available as it becomes available to this?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not entirely sure the mechanism yet, and maybe Becky or Steve can speak up to that. But yes, the idea is that the data would be made publicly available, whether in the NHD itself or in some other form. Becky or Steve, do you have any comments on that?
Sure, I think, well, you've hit it. Certainly the Southeast Texas data will be available in the NHD. That's actually probably fairly close. And the Oregon data will be as well. The Pennsylvania and South Carolina data sets are a little more experimental and are At the moment, we don't have a path for those into the NHD for distribution, but we'll definitely be providing updates on how those, on what we're finding out in those projects. Those are kind of the first two really large scope CONUS collections.
That's great, and leads kind of into my next question, and that, of course, is there going to be lessons learned or something like that that other states can start to build off of as they, start to want to go down the same road?
There will be there are lessons learned. There will be more lessons learned.
Yeah, Dan, I'll say that the specification and read rules, I think, are actively being updated in response to lessons learned. So we need a mechanism to get those lessons out in our specifications.
Hi, this is Ellen Fears with the Pennsylvania Geological Survey. I wanted to ask, it sounds like there are plans for, okay, so the NHD is going to, at some point, edits will no longer be applied and it will be an archival product. But it also sounds like elevation-derived hydrography is currently being incorporated into it. So I was kind of curious, and there might not be an answer to this yet. Is there like kind of a demarcation between where the NHD ends and 3D HP begins?
I'm not sure there will be a demarcation, there'll be a transition. But a lot of it, to be frank, hinges on the funding structure and when, if funds come through to really launch 3D HP, it'll probably be a crisper line. Otherwise, we'll have to engineer a transition with resources available, which is going to be a much harder challenge.
Great, thank you.
Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, it makes sense. I just wasn't sure if there was a plan in place yet or if it was as of yet undecided.
To be determined.
Cool, thank you, Steve.
This is Phil. Will the edits being made to the NHD WBD today, will they be conflated over to the new 3D HP?
I might actually pass that to Sue on her first day as our data acquisition lead.
Well, Steve, I guess we'll talk over each other, but my first sense is, Phil, I don't know about directly conflating over, but I would say that what exists in the NHD and WBD would inform the data that goes into 3D HP, if that makes sense. Like if it's edited data that does not necessarily align with the 3D elevation data, then no, the data wouldn't be conflated over. And I suspect you're focused on Indiana in some way.
Yep.
Yeah, so those data, I don't know, we'd have to talk about Indiana, those data, how they fit in with the 3D HP specifications or the elevation hydrography specifications. Right. And we may have to make some decisions around, similar to what's happening in 3DEP, around what data may meet 3D HP specifications with some accepted variance, right? Some acknowledged accepted variance, if that's necessary, with data like Indiana that is, came out of the gate way early. You guys were ahead of the curve in many ways.
Well, that brings up, some interesting issues. I just attended actually an Indiana Waters work group meeting earlier today, where our NHD and WB stewards were talking about somewhere near 700 hours of editing that still needs to be done to the various NHD and WBD layers. And I'm wondering if I should tell them, stop, or, what's, what is their, I guess, use case in doing that if that's all going to go away.
Well, first, it's not going to go away, as we mentioned. When the NHD and WBD, as they currently exist, or as they exist at the time, get frozen, for lack of a better term, those data would be available, right? And then moving into the 3DHP. So I guess we'd have to have a discussion about what sorts of edits are involved, and what the I guess return on investment would be for you guys to do those edits versus some other scenario.
Right. Yeah. Oh, let's absolutely have that conversation, because
Yeah, let's do, because
I'm not sure some of these edits are, long-term of long-term value. They're fixing things that they may no longer need once the data is in the 3DHP.
right. Yeah. And yeah, so there's a lot of nuances, and unfortunately, of course, it's early days to some degree.
Right.
So it's a bit of a moving target, right? And you understand that. But yeah, let's have a conversation about that. And I think that can inform what others may be doing,
Right.
With respect to folks who are kind of early and ahead of where we are with standing up the entire 3DHP program.
Sue, I've made a note that maybe at the next meeting, you'll have a little bit more, you'll be on firmer ground, and maybe you could provide us a short discussion on edits and such. So we can include that in the next interest group meeting in June.
That'd be great. Thanks, Linda.
I'm seeing a few comments in chat that are reinforcing this conversation. So we'll definitely capture the chat and add that into the list of topics. Thank you, Sue. Thank you, Steve.
Thanks, Phil. You're always ask the hard questions.
Well,
Any other questions for Sue? Where we have Becky, Sue, and Steve in the room?
Hi,
Questions?
this is Josh Greenberg, Washington State hydrographer, and I was curious, or NHD steward, I should say, sorry. I was curious if there are some time points that the funding is kind of contingent on. I mean, is it an ongoing ask, or are there dates where this will come up and either be approved or not? Both some of the short term or the BAA, and then kind of the larger 3DHP as a whole.
Sure. So really, it's contingent on congressional funding. So you see you see budget news go by in the paper, and that's where we get our funding for things like the BAA. So if at this moment we do not have we don't have funding. We have funding in the budget to support the existing NHD and WBD. If at some point that might change, and a new appropriation, we got some new money this year for Alaska, for example. But that's, we don't really know, and we certainly don't really have it until Congress signs the papers, or until the president signs the papers for the appropriation. And then everything sort of flows from that.
And so I'm sorry, I'm so naive with congressional funding.
Nah.
Is that an annual thing, or every 2 years, or is it just ongoing?
It's an annual budget. But it's theoretically passed before September 30th. But for many years, it's a continuing resolution into the spring. The president just signed the budget for FY22 that started in October yesterday, I think.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
And Josh, I'll just throw in, I might have missed it if Steve mentioned this, but this is kind of the whole cycle with this call to action and the laying out of a program plan. It's mirroring what happened with 3DEP many years ago with building a call for action and building sort of support for the program and laying out a program plan in the hopes that then congressional funding follows that. So we're hoping we're following on the successful footsteps of 3DEP in that vein.
All right, thank you, Sue, appreciate it. And Steve and Becky. Phil, you want to fill us in on the hub?
Sure. Put my camera on here. Hi, everyone. So we introduced the hub at the NSGIC conference. Was that last month? And there was a presentation available for everybody that basically just gives folks the I think the 30,000 foot overview of it. I would encourage anybody and everyone to, if you haven't seen that, you need to, I would suggest you see it, if nothing else, just to see Bailey perform in the presentation. But anyway, we've actually gone through or completing a first round of edits based on feedback from USGS. Didn't quite get them all done for today's meeting, but I'm coming real close to having the hub edits made. So we'll probably again, it's a evolving platform as well, as you can see, just all these documents and pages that USGS has just dropped on 3DHP is I think it's just the beginning of what's going to be a lot of information, a lot of good information. And so it's the hub is going to try to keep up with that, making those resources known, as well as making what states are doing discoverable and known. The hub is not content. Basic content will be there in this first round of edits, but I've not built out the search capability yet of the hub. That's I'm really that's the next thing I'm going to do when we have the basic components kind of formed and stabilized. We'll be building out the search and the metadata so that you can discover and find things using the search tool in the hub technology. So and we'll be showing it again at a future meeting, but encourage you just to it's live, it's there. You'll see edits pretty much on a weekly basis if you come back and visit, and encourage you to do that. It's live off the NSGIC homepage. And any questions, please let me know. There's a link right on the front page of it to email either Linda or myself. Really looking forward to feedback. And we'll try to keep up with USGS is publishing all this new 3DHP stuff as quickly as we can. And I would encourage this page that just dropped on the 3DHP for the nation. That is a very interesting and really great document. I've just started reading it, and it's very informative. Good job, USGS. Any questions?
Yes, I agree, Phil. A lot of good information. Please, if you didn't see it in the chat, Becky posted it in. Thank you, Phil,
You're welcome.
for presenting and for all your efforts. All right. Most of you are aware that we have been working on, I'm getting feedback. Am I being heard okay, or should I move to headset?
You're okay. I think you're okay.
Sounds okay.
I think I answered my own question, so. Most of you are aware we've been working on critical factors related to the 3D-HP. And the reason we have such a vague term, critical factors, it is a combination of challenges, concerns, recommendations, ideas. All the folks that have explored this topic and thought about what this might mean to them at the state, regional, federal level, we wanted to compile that information. So the process that we used is we initially went through the 3D-HP forum presentations and discussions and pulled some key components from there. We developed a core set of critical factors, and then we explored and expanded those during the critical factors workshop that we held at NSGIC at the 2021 annual conference. And then after that, we compiled and refined, and then we vetted those we created a spreadsheet and vetted that with the 3D-HP for the Nation Working Group. That's what I'm going to go over today. And the purpose for developing these critical factors and their role is, first of all, as a project, the NSGIC for the 3D-HP for the Nation project, we're looking for tasks that we might address, whether development of guidance documents, apps, is there a need for consensus input on the national program? Whatever that might be. So are there any things that perk out as, hey, this is something that we, NSGIC, as a community could address? And then there are other factors that need to be addressed directly by the states, their stakeholders, the private sector, the 3D-HP program, FGDC, other stakeholders. So as we go through these, I want to make sure that you don't look at these and go, oh, that's something that the federal 3D-HP is going to address. It's not. It's something we as a community I think there's opportunities for all of us in these. So I will just give you a heads up. There are 5 primary areas, and the first one was there were issues related to the integration with national data sets that we all use. We've heard a little bit of that discussion here with regard to NHD, WBD, NWI, DEM, and so questions and concerns arising around those data schemas. Is it feasible? And think of these smaller bullets as just questions or suggestions or thoughts. Is it feasible to develop crosswalks between the features? Are there key features in these source data sets that will be retained in the 3D-HP? And what is there a discussion needs to be had as to what those key features may be? Is there a means of creating cartographic representation models that align these resources? So the thought here is the 3D-HP needs to be aligned with the schemas of as feasible of the existing and source data sets. But then there's this other flip where we go back and we need to update the source data set. So is there a means for developing a feedback method where the source data gets updated? Is there a way to enhance the source data set attributes with 3D-HP attributes? More specific things like, can we update the 3.QA/QC process to avoid fake cut lines as they go into the 3D-HP? And a lot of questions as we get this higher resolution is how do we improve the process to update genus with these new, more refined feature names? And do we need to update genus? So again, these are all discussions to be had. One of the key concerns was the preservation of data development decisions and data. So as these data sets as 3D-HP is developed, folks want to know what were the decisions made, what were the interim products, what manipulations were made. I think that's going to help the community transition from one product to the other, having a better understanding of what is different or what is new. And then another one, which is we need to consider the implications of having higher resolution hydrography. I mean, it's going to be increased maintenance and computing time for all of us. And Phil's the one that brought this up. You know, as we identify these new higher resolution features, are they going to be subject to things such as the EPA clean water WOTUS requirements. So again, the idea is that we're in the swirling process. Maybe a loop is not, maybe it needs to just be a tornado, Sue, where we're looking at the influence of one on the other, and what are we gaining and what do we want to make sure we're not losing. So with that, I think I'd open it up to anybody to have comments on these. I know it's a lot to take in at once, but does anything here resonate with folks?
All of it.
I second that, Lorraine Wright. I'd like to make a comment. I don't usually sit in on these meetings, but I've recently been trying to look at FGDC standards and the move from the old way of doing things to trying to join all data sets across the nation together with the standard. It is very overwhelming just even look at that data. And it sounds like you're doing the same thing here with your information. The general folks out here probably need really some very simple basic guidance on this move to taking NHD to the 3-dep. And I know you're talking about all that now, but this is a huge amount of changing in this process. I just wanted to throw that out there.
Thank you, Lorraine, and I will let USGS respond, but to be I'm not sure if you're aware, USGS has provided, again, that website, a lot of information about this concept of a national topographic model, and this is what this is all, sort of pointing towards. But one of the key factors in the 3DHP program is, like the 3-dep program, they've developed specifications for what the product should be, but they're not specifying the methodology. And there will be dependency on private sector partners to develop these resources. So at this stage, we're not asking, the state of Indiana to go in and create a 3DHP product. Don't know in the state of Indiana they will. I know. So again, I'm going to defer to the USGS team to correct anything I just said.
No, I think this is Steve H. I think you're on target there, Linda. I think one of the tricks here is that in a lot of ways the 3DHP product, which is still being defined, but it will be a substantially different product than what we've been using. You may the NHD, the WBD, and actually the NWI as well, largely are they're digital cartographic products, right? So they're derived from topo maps typically, or better representations of the same features that were on the topo maps. So those were really in a lot of ways engineered to capture all the different structures and all the different things that are along the water courses, really shifting to a different model that frankly encourages and enables modeling and machine readability of the data. So we want to go more for a water eye view of the data rather than how a person sees what's going on the landscape. Now that doesn't mean we're going to toss all the dams and toss all the other features, but how those are represented and how central they are to the data set as opposed to maybe being linked data is definitely something that's open for debate.
Is it fair to say, Steve, that by developing 3DHP from 3-dep, NWI, all these things, that integration is sort of inherent in the process?
That's the idea. The goal here is to have the hydrography data fully integrated with the elevation data, so that those are interoperable and that they can be used for watershed modeling, flood modeling, different kinds of applications, on scales ranging from, continental down to, neighborhood or blocks even. And so there's a lot of scope here that we're still sorting out. But it's definitely an emphasis on machine reading of the data rather than sort of making a map with the data.
Thank you. I'm going to move on to our next one. Feel free to add questions to the chat as they occur to you. Like the national data sets where we're looking up, we also need to look down. And there's a lot of questions about how states will integrate this data with their own framework data. Similar questions. What about the schemas? Is there a method, a consistent methodology for enhancing the 3D-HP data model at the state level? What is the ability to integrate local features like legal drains and things like that? So again, questions, things to explore. And of course, there's going to be variations in the spatial resolution, the temporal resolution, and the coordinate systems as well. So, I know you all have their questions about sizing the catchment areas, adjudicating differences in DEM resolution. Everybody wants their orthophotography to align. And I think if I can kind of build on something that Dan Ross has said numerously, I think, there's some opportunities as far as partnerships. Are there methods and are people exploring methods and processes for doing these that can be shared across states and other stakeholders? I know one of the suggestions, I believe it was Phil, with regards to differences in coordinate system was that if we maybe implement EPSG registered coordinate systems, that's going to support standardized transforms between those systems. So any questions specific to integrating your state framework with your state framework data?
Linda,
Comments?
yeah, this is Phil. Do we have a comment in one of these related to local governments, whether city or counties, who often have their own version of hydrography? Do we have a comment in there anywhere? Is this the place for it?
It is. There's some. This is a generalization, but the idea is state framework later as well as the local and regional. For instance, those catchment areas, the integration of local features, things like that. So this is the place, Bill.
Okay.
But it is part of that dialogue.
Because that's a whole nother can of worms that states have to deal with is they start doing something on a Huck 8 and find that the local governments in that geography have their own, the city hydro, they have their own line work. God knows where it came from, but it's what they use, it's what they attribute, and that ends up being another little spinny wheel off that existing data set graphic you have there is the roll up of that or the roll down of that, I guess, the communication of this new data to the locals so that you're not getting, everybody's using the same data set at some point in time, or at least the same core geometry. That's a challenge.
I'm just capturing some notes here. Go ahead.
That's it. I was just,
No, I think you make a great point. And as we know, we're not going to say, any names. So we know states that have two different hydrography, state sanctioned hydrography states
right.
and everything.
Well, it's definitely a challenge the states will be uniquely having to address, because they're getting it from both ends, kind of, they're in the middle. So how do they manage that and take advantage of the new stuff so that the folks locally, don't feel the need to draw their own?
Right. And then the last in the swirly set here is the mapping of subsurface drainage, both natural and human made. And we could talk culverts all day. But some of the thoughts were establishing a national subsurface drainage feature and attributes that would include culverts, agricultural drain tiles, karst, things like that. mapping decisions, it would be great if there were some best practices established. So even though projects are being done, there might, and there is no national specification as to the methodology. Maybe this is where something we as the NSGIC community can come in with some best practices. I think Steve touched on this. Automation, as automate as able is key, based on those best practices. And then the statewide data set on these natural and human age, there's been mentioned it would be required that a statewide subsurface drainage data set would be need to hydro enforce DEMs. And that's a little out of my skill set if somebody wants to address that specifically. So any questions, comments?
Yeah, Linda, this is Steve H. Like, I guess to the statewide data set required to hydro enforce DEMs item, we've actually, as some of these pilot projects have been developing, there's a two direct, a feedback loop, much like on your slides here. We have typically looked for culvert data sets around, in these study areas. Sometimes they're there, sometimes they're not. And what we generally find is frequently they're really incomplete. Right, so federal roads, state roads, county roads are usually pretty good, but we also end up encountering a lot of smaller culvert features as we're mapping smaller hydro features. So, places where a farmer put something in so he could cross from one field to the other, or, things in driveways, or, one, I'm trying to remember what the number was for one of the test Huck 8s in Pennsylvania, but, there's thousands and thousands of culverts in that Huck 8. And that's it's a relatively rural area. So we're doing a pretty good job of finding them. Having some hints up front helps. But I don't think I think it's really unlikely that most, that at a statewide level, there'd be a good data set of these features. I don't know that there'd be we're gonna have to find some of them working through the data. Probably gonna find most of them working through the data. But providing that back is something that would be part of the data set.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, it's probably not feasible to consider we have something that would be a reliable resource in that.
It's really hard to know. We've had a number of people, number of entities step forward and say they had a culvert data set, and they do. But sort of at the level of precision and completeness that we need, typically they're not really there.
Okay. And Dan Ross, yeah, absolutely. Thank you for correcting. You want to come off mute, Dan? I was going, wait a minute, I'm going to have him explain. Nothing's going to benefit from a collaborative approach. That doesn't sound like Dan Ross to me.
No, I'm just thinking that the more we can do this together, the better we're going to be nationwide as we move towards a nationwide model. Common practices within states, between states, any of those things, as we automate, it'd be nice if we could automate once and share it many times, those sorts of approaches. This is all stuff that the NSGIC community is used to, and it might take a little more time in the beginning, but the outcomes are much stronger and much more consistent when we do that.
Agreed.
Hey, this is Eric Jesperson from Pennsylvania. One of the things I always appreciate about NSGIC, but I never quite figured out the puzzle, was to find the states that were most similar to ours. So that I didn't have to paw through 50 solutions. I could paw through 6 or 8 and find out which ones apply. And that might be a little easier in this hydro space. Which states are, there's things that we're learning in these pilots, and they're early, and it's easy enough to transfer them in here. but they won't apply to all the states. So maybe we could have some kind of groupings on similar physiography, similar problems. I'll go to that roads. Yeah, when the contractor made their first report on progress, they said the most useful data set we can get is roads. And it was clear. I don't think anybody else should be fighting to get culvert data sets. Maybe I'm wrong, Steve, but I think that's already like a foregone conclusion. And those kind of lessons keep moving forward. The lesson that we're going to have to tackle next is urban. You know, that urban and rural interface. We think we're comfortable with techniques and maybe even partnerships for the rural part of the rural parts of the state, or maybe even the small municipalities. But the urban model and the density that we have to have, that's a big lift. But if any of you guys have learned some of that, I know Washington DC did a pilot, but mostly they learned that it's really hard, and I don't know that they learned and that it won't necessarily fit into the NHD model. Good lessons, but we got to go faster on that one.
I fully agree that not all of it will work nationwide, and that we should take opportunities or find opportunities where we can to find, as you suggest, where there are like states and try to pair them together where we can. But that'll take a little work. I just think the work is worthwhile up front instead of everybody going their own direction.
Yeah, even identifying why something doesn't work for you can be very helpful, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. But physiography. I'm looking at North Carolina. I'm looking at Eastern states, New York State. New Jersey's been a real lesson for us in what they tried. Yeah, they've been kind of a model because they got NHD before they had any LiDAR, and have a terrific data set that'll be easier to kind of convert later now.
And that's a good takeaway for NSGIC, to do what we can to help, bring you folks together, because that's one of the things we're good at once we figure it out.
So just a couple more. The next one will get away from data set specific a little bit to the technical considerations. The development of a uniform national data set is daunting. I think we all agree on that. And we already heard that the EDH specification is being updated based on the pilot projects, which makes perfect sense. And so I think one of the points that was made was that, that specification is going to have to be updated as needed. We need guidance for watersheds that cross state boundaries, and I'm sure that this is something that's already been thought of by somebody and may in fact be in the specification. And then of course there was interest, as you all know, in exploring geomorphons, which we had a presentation recently, as most of you know, that's basically doing analysis that uses landscape context. So again, just kind of a spattering down there, just thoughts that folks had with regards to the development of a national data set. Variations in stream network classification. There was a call for, wouldn't it be great if we had a standard stream classification system? And are there methods for automating stream classification? Again, this is just dialogue. And conflation, developing tools that would include subsurface drainage, wetlands, seasonal flooding, and other new 3D-HP features. So these were not things that, they're just, technical considerations that we should think about as we move forward. And I kind of interpreted that as, we've got some specifications, we need to develop some guidance. We might be able to, through that guidance, come up with some classification systems and then implement those classification systems through their tools. Any comments on technical considerations?
I don't know if it fits in well here, but I do have a concern about with all the added information and complexity that some of our traditional methods and tools don't process the data very well. So
I think Very
Are we building
legitimate,
something?
Josh.
Are we building something we can't even use? I know that sometimes even the existing data we have now brings our GIS session to a halt. So
Well, we know that the private sector will adapt with the new data formats, right? It's in their business interest.
Yeah,
Any
and well, I'll say one thing, and not to be a smart ass, but I will say this, that, you know, at the beginning of 3DEP, everybody was like, oh, QL3 is great, right? And now we've got folks, you know, states that are standardizing on QL1. But I think one of the other keys, Josh, too, is to lean down the data model as well. Because NHD is a bit of a beast, to be honest. And so I think that, in addition to Linda's comment about you know, the adaptation of software and systems to handle denser and denser data, hopefully will keep pace as we move forward with data like this.
that's a great idea. And you know, to be clear, the HydroAd tool, I think, is also a great example of taking advantage of cloud resources to bring a lot of this to everyone.
Right? Yeah,
That's a great
really good
observation.
example.
Right.
Yeah.
All right.
So yeah, hopefully we'll get there, and you won't have to rely on your desktop, or you get a really beefy desktop.
And of course, the last feature is planning and implementation considerations. What are the roles and responsibilities? The 3DHP program has definitely laid out some roles and responsibilities. It's still a little vague on exactly what state and regional stakeholders. I mean, we know we have an innovation role. We know we have a governance role, but understanding, refining those roles is going to be part of the process. There is a request that, can we provide outreach and education to stakeholders based on their role? I don't know if that, does that mean FAQs or things like that specific to the stakeholder role? And how will local experts be engaged in the design and the review of data, especially in those flat and urban areas where, I think Steve talked about the farmer who dug the ditch next door. How do we get that information into the product? At the state level, 3DHP coordination, there's going to be a need to inventory your state and regional hydrography data sets, a need to inventory state and regional elevation data sets, identify your 3DHP stakeholders, because it's not just NHD anymore, and hopefully establish a 3DHP working group and with leadership. Preparation, folks are anxious. We've had some questions about funding and such, but what will those BAA content the proposal content requirements be? Are there going to be resources to help folks with those proposals? We all know what we get, that we've got these resources with 3DEP, and I'm sure that USGS and their partners are moving forward with those. Do we need to develop a 3DHP acquisition plan? This is a role NSGIC has played in the past, providing a guidance document on how you might do that through 3DEP. Is that something we want to pick up through 3DHP? And how to sort of assess the USGS gypsy contractors with respect to 3DHP capabilities. I know we saw a little dialogue on the side. Sue talked about how they've had that the existing contractors have been highly successful in these pilot projects and other independent projects. But there are questions about how do we assess these contractors? What are the methodologies, the tools, the resources for assessing them? And then, of course, it always comes down to money. And suggestions for something like developing a fact sheet that would support primarily state in stakeholder engagement, finding folks both at the regional level and the administrative level. How do we bring them on board? And again, budget estimates to support the proposal development, which is something we've come used to with 3DEP. So as usual, there's a planning component here. We need to know our roles and responsibility. We need to coordinate among ourselves. we need to prepare, and we need to fund what it is we're doing. So any comments on planning and implementation? Is there anything here that resonates, scares, or encourages anyone?
Hey, Linda, this is Mark Saffron Dewberry. I'll just comment from a lot of discussion here about the contractors. And I think in the way that we can help is obviously in helping to develop budgets for how this, how much different degrees of 3DHP would cost to do. To be honest, I think we're all in the same kind of thing where we're learning it as well. We're developing the processes, as you all know, and working through it, working with USGS, working at state level, and that kind of thing. And so there's, I think, going to be a little bit of a lag there, even in terms of what we can provide as good data versus not in terms of costs and budgeting. I think it's just something that we're all part of, but the more we learn, the better we get at this, the more we'll be able to share with the rest of the community here.
I think you hit it exactly right. But we're just in this together. We're figuring out the process. There's great opportunity, and it's just a matter of figuring out what the first, what we do, 1, 2, 3 steps. All right. Well, those are the critical factors. We will send out a link. Right now, it's in a spreadsheet. You've got some slides here. We've got to figure out what format's going to best support the community. I want to thank everybody for their contributions. This was a really rich dialogue, and I hope that it's going to inform states and the federal agencies as we move forward, again, hand in hand, towards this goal, if we can say so. So we have a little bit of time left. If anybody wants to share information about your 3D hydrography activities or discoveries or exciting things that you have going on with 3D hydrography.
Hey, this is Eric from Pennsylvania. I have one closing comment on the critical factors, and then I do have something to talk about for a meeting I had last week with Fish and Wildlife. But the feedback pace that NSGIC provides has to be pretty quick because of the pace of technological change and the pace of innovation. Right? It 2 years and 3 years to hear what someone did. It's things are happening in 6 and 10 month blocks. Pretty interesting stuff. So if we could find a way to strive for like real current information. I know we meet monthly, but there's so much stuff. That hub looks like a good spot, but the pace of innovation is so strong. This forum can support that, and it's pretty important. And so in that vein, with that same intent, I'd like to report something that happened just last week, and it happened because of this NSGIC forum. There was a forum where Alaska folks talked about integration with Fish and Wildlife and NWI and NHD. We just made a couple calls. Our USGS liaison got us in touch with the NWI folks, and last week we met with the technical lead from the Massachusetts office and the NWI technical lead from Virginia office, and they were able to explain that there's an entire feature class that they call narrow linear habitats that are really just they're just small streams, less than 15 meters wide. And they're just ready to get rid of that out of their database and let it be an NHD feature. And they're going to test it where we got 2 of these 3 Huck 8s that we got in our central Pennsylvania pilot. It's all happening pretty quick. And all we have to do is just encourage them and provide some other local knowledge and local contacts. And we're all Jake. And they get to dump something that's been a pain in the neck to maintain, and that will already be maintained in the new NHD, or theoretically that's how it'll be. So yeah, that's news. That NWI and NHD integration is solid. And Becky, I'm sorry to lose you into that. Megan Lang mentioned your name just last week.
Well, Eric, thank you, because making those connections is what this project is supposed to be doing. When we started this process, the first thing USGS said is we need information exchange around this topic, and so it's really good to know that this facilitated you guys moving forward, as well as the NWI, and with that future vision of what 3D HP will be. Any other just comments, questions people would like to share?
Hey, Linda, this is Phil. At the end here, I guess I'd like to, if there's a few minutes left at the very end after people are done talking, I'd like to show Eric specifically where he can contribute that in real time to our hub, because that's one of the things we've designed into the information hub, is that if someone's got a case study, if someone's got an example, if someone wants to share, literally it's 2 minutes of filling out a survey 1, 2, 3, and you'll get a point on the map for your project with a link to it directly on our hub site. With, you don't even have to email me or Linda. And at the end here, I'll be happy to show you how to do that, because I'd love, folks to start contributing, their projects and their ideas on the map as sooner rather than later.
Even though that's not my strong suit, Phil, I'll bite. Just
Okay.
in the spirit of the day and the project.
Okay. Well, we still have a few minutes. I'm gonna shut up and let you guys talk some more, but then at the end here, hang on, Eric, and I'll show you.
Phil, I feel like an old time operator. We'll leave the line open at the end of the. Josh, did you have something you wanted to share?
Yeah, I just wanted to let people know that we got funding for the project that I presented to this group last fall, where we are proposing to do a pilot project to look at doing traditional EDH, geomorphons, and benefits of high resolution land cover to create improved hydrography, and working with local jurisdictions. And so along those lines, we have been lining up strategic partners with our meetings with our stakeholders. We have 80 people, stakeholders signed up statewide for a meeting next month, and looking forward to starting this project this summer. And we did get Professor Matt Baker started on kind of a pre-pilot, and he's been getting some results back from geomorphon in our pilot project area, and it's looking very promising, and it's pretty exciting to see some of the output.
That is, of course, Washington is organizing their 3DHP community. We depend on you guys for that. And thank you. I did want to bring up Matt's presentation on geomorphons is available at the NSGIC Learning link. For those of you that don't know, Matt had an emergency surgery last month, so we haven't got the Q&A up. He is doing better, but that's in the process as well. If you're interested in the geomorphons. I see Becky's. I'll let you read Becky's note, and in the thing. Any other question? Any other good news to share?
This is Phil again. I want to thank Becky.
Yes.
For these first 2 years of helping us try to understand this project, and wish you good luck in your future endeavors, and hopefully, Steve, you're up for it, bud. Oh, he got off. I think he dropped off.
Well, thanks so much, Phil. This is Becky. Yeah, I thanks to everybody who's been participating in this project so far. I think we've come a long way. It hasn't been that long, but we really started at 0, and I feel like we've already gone to 1,000. So thanks especially to Linda and Phil and everybody at NSGIC who's really been supporting this and driving it forward, and to, of course, all the stewards and GIOs out there. So as I said in the chat, I'll now be overseeing the liaison. So I'm not going far. Hopefully I'll be at the NSGIC annual in the fall, and be real engaged with the group. So I'm excited to do, to work with NSGIC not only on hydro, but on other things as well.
Thank you so much, Becky. It's been a great project and lots of it's been extremely interesting, I'll say, from my point of view. And yes, we continue to look forward to working with you through the liaisons. As we said, the NSGIC 3DHP forum is the third Wednesday of the month, 3 to 4:30. We had to change it this month. My apologies if that caused any confusion. You can watch the interest group. You should have announcements there, and the NSGIC calendar for registration information. If I could be so bold as suggest you put in a placeholder on your calendar so you don't block out that date. And speaking of exciting things going on, and Eric and Ellen, they have agreed, they're going to be talking to us next month, April 20th, on the hydro coordination story in Pennsylvania. And so from the guy that just told us we got to start moving faster, we get the message that it takes longer than you think. So, so any last minute questions, comments? Josh asks, is it too early to think about this meeting at the annual meeting? No, absolutely. There will be some sort of 3DHP gathering at the annual meeting. For those of you that don't know, that'll be in Portland, Oregon. And we look forward to that meeting. We can't do 3DEF and 3DHP workshops in the same meeting. It's just a bit of an overload for us. So I believe our plan is for a 3DEF workshop in the fall. But we will be having some sort of 3DHP project coordination at that time. Thank you, Josh. Well, thank you all for your time today. I appreciate it. You can feel free to follow up with any of us. And we hope to see you next month. And we'll hear from Eric and Ellen. Thank you all.
Hey, Linda.
And I'm going to leave it open for Phil and
well,
Eric.
Yeah, can I share? Can you let me share screen?
Absolutely. Wait a second. Tell me what you're going to share. No, I'm just kidding. I assume the hub.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm going to show them where the survey is to fill it out.
Right.
Yeah. Anyone else want to hang on? That's fine.
Thank you all. You should be able